so nice to see so many people out here. This is great. Thank you. I think we're going to start the panel with Rocio and just sharing her story, and then we will hear from the authors about their books and how they relate to mental illness, and then we're going to just kind of do a Q&A and see what's on your mind.
Okay. Yeah. So is this on? You guys hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, so my name is Rocio, and I'm really, really honored and super excited to be here with all of you today. To get a chance to talk about my experiences with mental health challenges. As you guys all know, probably know, mental illness is not something that is widely talked about, especially in schools, just kind of in society really. And it's a real shame because there are so many people that deal with mental health challenges that are diagnosed or undiagnosed and are not able to seek the help they need because they are afraid of being judged, or they feel like family members, friends, peers won't be able to support them. So it's something that is very real, and a lot of people deal with. You know, it's a reality, and so I'm just so honored to be here and to hopefully be able to normalize the conversation around mental health and mental wellness, and kind of just make this something that is okay to talk about and not have it be so much of a taboo anymore among us. So without further ado, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I consider myself a mental health advocate, and I feel like the best way that I can go about normalizing the conversation is to talk about my story. So I was 14 years old when I first started experiencing mental health challenges. I was a freshman in high school. I had always been, you know, someone very cheery and someone, you know, had a good family life, had friends. I did really well in school. And then when I went to Hillsdale, I started noticing changes in myself. I would get crying spells. I would start crying for no reason at all. I could be with friends, I could be at home having dinner, and I would just break down. And I would just have this overwhelming feeling of dread and of sadness. And it wasn't just, oh, you know, I'm sad, because no, it was something so deep and so rooted. And I would be in class, and all of a sudden I would start to feel so anxious. And I don't know if anybody knows what anxiety feels like. Maybe some of you do. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. Yeah. And it's not so much like feeling nervous. It goes so much more beyond that. So much more beyond that. And so I was just in class sitting down, and I would start to feel really nervous, really shaky, really jittery. Like I felt like I was weird. I felt like people were staring at me. I felt like I was just abnormal, like there was something wrong with me. And I actually started cutting class. And mind you, I wasn't cutting class to go to the mall, to hang out with friends. If I wasn't in class, it's because I had such horrible anxiety that I was stuck in the bathroom stall for 45 minutes, for 50 minutes, for 2 hours in the bathroom, because I couldn't get the courage to get out and just be about, just exist. I couldn't do that. It was so hard for me. And so unfortunately, from that sadness, I started feeling hopeless, like I'm not good at doing anything. I'm weird. And then the hopelessness turned into feeling worthless. You know, am I really worth anything? You know, am I going to get a good job someday? Am I going to feel healthy again? What am I going to do? So from feeling hopeless and from feeling worthless, I started to have suicidal thoughts. Thoughts of, I just shouldn't be alive anymore. I shouldn't be alive anymore because what am I doing? You know, what am I doing with my life? There was an instant when I was with my parents, and we were on the freeway, and I was in the back seat, and I said, you know, what would happen if I just opened the door and if I just jumped out? Like, what would happen? You know? And I never had a plan to commit suicide. I never attempted suicide, but I did have suicidal thoughts, and that alone is serious and scary enough. And so after that, I went to a school counselor. I was crying in class one day, and my teacher said, let's go to the school advocate. I said, okay. I went. That was on a Friday, October 30th, 2009. And the following Monday, I went to see my doctor, many years, my pediatrician, and I told her everything. But before that, I told my counselor everything. I disclosed everything. She called my parents. My parents came into the room, and I remember that the counselor had written down everything that I had told her. So suicidal thoughts, feeling worthless, feeling sad, feeling hopeless. And she read everything to my parents. And as we were doing that, we were all sitting on a table, and I remember I couldn't look at my parents in the eye. I couldn't look at my mom in the eye. I couldn't look at my dad in the eye. That was the first time that I experienced shame because of my condition. I was embarrassed. I was disgusted with myself. It wasn't only now I'm feeling bad, I'm also making my parents hurt. It's not just me anymore, it's them hurting too. So I felt guilty and I felt responsible for that, which I shouldn't have felt, but I did at that moment. And so I went to the hospital, and I went in for a psychiatric evaluation, and because of my suicidal thoughts, I was deemed a threat to myself, understandably so, and I was taken to the youth psychiatric unit of a hospital nearby. And I was there for a week, and that was just a shocker to me. I remember waking up the next day and just crying and crying and crying and saying, how am I here? How did it get to this point in my life? I'm only 14, and I'm in here. I'm in a hospital, and I don't know when I'm going to get out, and I don't know what I have. And I had all these people, providers, doctors, therapists saying, we want to know what's wrong. We want to know what's wrong because we need to fix this. And I would say, I don't know what's wrong. Nothing traumatic had happened in my life. I hadn't lost anybody. I hadn't undergone any type of bullying or abuse. And so people couldn't understand that I could feel this way for no reason at all. You know, and I always felt kind of pressured to say, I feel this, I feel this. You know, even for doctors, many times, one time I was bipolar, another day I was depressed, another day, according to family members, I just wanted attention. And so it was hard, you know, it was hard to feel all of this and not be able to put a label to it, if you say. And then once I was speaking to somebody in the ambulance, and he said, you know, there is such a thing as clinical depression, and depression can be very biological. You don't have to have this huge reason to feel this, you know, and that was partly a major thing about myself that I learned, where, you know, I'm growing up, there are chemical imbalances, my depression can be very biological, and so can my anxiety. And so learning that about myself, was hard in a way, because it's like, okay, well, what do I do about this? You know, like how do I fix this? And for many years it was, how do I fix this? How do I fix it? How do I make it go away? Now what people will telling me, it doesn't go away. You have to learn to live well with it. And being so young and kind of hearing that was really hard. But anyways, so I was hospitalized a number of 3 times. When I was young, I was my freshman year. I missed a lot of school. I never went to a football game. I never went to prom. I never went to homecoming because I was so anxious. I was so anxious. And it wasn't anxiety so much about what I was feeling, then it was anxiety of people are going to know what's wrong with me. You know, I would self-harm, and I would wear a long sleeve to school, and I would feel like people would stare at me. I would feel like they would stare, and then I would think people are going to think I'm crazy. You know, they're going to think I'm psycho or psychotic or crazy or weird. And that was really hard to deal with. You know, people would ask me, Rocio, why are you absent so much? Oh, I had the flu. Oh, I broke a leg. I'm better now. You know, all of these reasons. Oh, I went to Mexico. I have family there, and I went out of the country. I was so embarrassed to say I went through a personal situation. Like, I couldn't even say that. And then finally I went to a therapeutic day school. I got my credits. I did that. All the while I was always seeing my therapist. I saw her 3 times a week. I saw my psychiatrist when I was early on, I was placed on medications. Some medications had really bad side effects. There was one that I took that was really, really kind of tough on me, on my body. And I remember I was in my parents' room, and I was eating a popsicle, like an ice popsicle, and I had just taken my medication. And I don't know when, but I passed out. I completely passed out, and my mom came in later to find popsicle in my hair, all over my face, on my hands, on the sheets and everything, and that is horrible. You know, it's horrible. It's feeling powerless. And so, you know, as I worked with shame and as I worked with acceptance, and it's taken so many years, it's so many years of really accepting and of really honoring, you know, this part of me. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of self-work to just embrace it, you know. I don't ever think of fixing myself or telling myself, this is wrong with you, Rocio. No, I am kind, I am compassionate to myself. You know, if I need help, I ask for help, and there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. The most important work you guys will ever do is the work you do on yourselves, because you guys that's the person that you're going to be with for the rest of your life, you know? And I've had a lot of judgment, you know, unfortunately. You know, people sometimes say things with good intentions, and people have different experiences, but it kind of translates in a hurtful manner. For example, I had an anxiety attack, and my aunt came, and my aunt said, she's very religious, and so she said, you know, Rosa, we have to pray. We have to pray for this to go away. I think I was 15, and I said, okay, but I thought it was just going to be, you know, us holding hands and maybe having a nice prayer session. And so she starts saying, okay, no, we need other people in here, because this is the only way it's going to go away. And so we had family from Mexico, family from Utah, and so my aunt brought my family from downstairs, and she brought everybody. So I was in my parents' room in the bed, and I had this just group of people around me, and they were all praying, and they were all like chanting. My aunt was like, she had her hand on my forehead, and she was saying, you know, all these things and chanting all these words, and I was just there, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like I said, like, I really am crazy. I have all these people around me trying to get rid of my depression and of my anxiety. Like, I must really be crazy. And I always say, like, it felt like I was having an exorcism. That's what it felt like. People just around me and trying to get rid of whatever was going on. And obviously it doesn't work that way. And obviously, you know, I did not need an exorcism. But you know, it's been an interesting journey. And people always ask me, you know, do you wish you could change things, or do you wish you could change your past so that you didn't have this? And I always say, absolutely not. You know, it's the hardest thing that has ever happened to me, and of course I'm gonna get emotional. You know, I usually don't get emotional, but my parents are in the back, and I've done many presentations. This is the first time they come see me, so first time after many years of presenting, first time they come, so you know, special to me. But yeah, you know, I always say that I wouldn't change anything. You know, I've learned so much from this. I've learned so much about myself, and at 22, I feel like I have so much insight, and I am just so. I've learned to be compassionate and to realize that, you know, we're all individuals and we all have our own boat that we're on. You know, we all face challenges. We all face hardships. That's why it's so important to be kind to each other, because you never know what the other person is going through. You know, we always say mental illness does not have a face to it. Anybody can be going through difficulties, absolutely anybody. You know, some of the worst times that I've had is when I've looked up the most made up, because I don't want people to know what's wrong with me. People would never suspect it, but I was going through a hard time. And so that's why I always say, you know, it's just better to be kind to each other. You know, we don't know what's going on in people's lives. I'm probably running out of time now, but yeah, I've learned to accept it, you know. I've learned to honor my emotions. really honor them, really know that they enable me to be a better person. I have been now in commissions, and committees for the past two years. I do a lot of speaking, a lot of public speaking on my story with Helene, NAMI, Singing Through Stigma. She's really nice. She's an angel. I never thought that I would be in front of a room of people and talking about my experiences. And you guys are all strangers, but somehow I feel connected to you because we're all here for a positive purpose to know more about this. And yeah, I'm in committees. I am the new vice chair of the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Recovery Commission in San Mateo County, and I'm really proud of that. I've done a lot of advocating, but the most thing that I'm proud of, I think, where I feel the proudest is just being in a room, like I am right now, and talking to people and talking to youth especially. I really wish that when I was 14 and going through all those difficulties, I had somebody come and talk to me, because then I wouldn't have felt so alone. I really wouldn't have felt so alone. And I would have known that it was okay to feel what I was feeling, and that most importantly there was hope and that I could get better. And I always say that, if I, in speaking, if I can give anybody even a little dose of hope or plant a little seed of thought, then everything that I went through was so worth it. This is what is so empowering to me. My goal is to be either a mental health and family therapist or a licensed clinical social worker. And I know that, all of my life experiences are going to enable me to be a good therapist to somebody someday, because I've been there, I've been down that road many times. Even now, my road to recovery is not always an uphill thing. I still have my days where I feel anxious. I still have my days where I feel really sad. But I've learned to take care of myself, and I've learned to put myself first, and I've learned to honor what I feel, not push it away. If I'm feeling anxious, I don't say, okay, I'm going to pretend it's not here. No, I sit down, I say, okay, Rocio, what is anxiety telling you? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to take a little bit slower? What is my body trying to tell me? And I listen to my body, and I listen to myself, and I honor myself, and I am as kind as I possibly can be. And so, if I could say one last thing, it'd be if you or anybody is experiencing mental health challenges, just know that you are not alone. There is always, always going to be somebody who cares. There's always going to be somebody who cares. Absolutely. You guys are never alone. I know it's scary, and I know that it feels very lonely, but there is always going to be somebody who cares. And if you feel like somebody is going through difficulties, say something. Say something. I remember when I was in high school, and sometimes I had self-harm marks on my skin. People would stare. I wish that somebody would have said, "Rocio, are you okay?" That's all. That's all. Are you okay? How are you? That would have meant the world to me. And I know that we really want to help those that we care about and that we love. And just like I say to my Mom, you are my mom. I don't expect you to be a therapist and have all these degrees on psychology. Just, be there. Be there. And I think the most powerful thing she's ever said to me is not giving me advice, not saying, what I should do, but just saying, I'm sorry you're going through this. Treating each other with empathy and compassion, and just being there for them. That is really the most powerful thing that anybody has ever given me, just their empathy and their compassion, and just willing to kind of just be there for me. And so now, and in my career, I really hope to do that with other people, So without further ado, I think it's time for me to stop talking now. But really, it's been so great. Being here and talking to all of you is so healing. It really is. It helps me in my own recovery, and it's very healing for me, and I love seeing embraces like that because it warms my heart, and it makes me think, man, Rocio, like, what you went through was so worth it, to be able to see something like that, and it's going to be okay. It's always going to be okay, Even if I am a complete stranger, I'm telling you, it's going to be fine, Life has its tough moments, but man, it makes you so much stronger, and oof, it's going to be okay.
Thank you, Rocio.
Thank you, everybody.
What an inspiration. It's so nice to hear from someone so young who went through such a difficult time during high school and during adolescence, and is so inspiring here, talking about not ignoring those challenges, not pretending they don't exist, but embracing them and moving forward with them and sharing so that she can help other people, which is really inspiring. So thank you. We'll have a chance to ask her questions at the end of the panel, but thank you so much.
Sure.
We're going to move to Anne, who's going to talk to us a little bit about her book and how it relates to mental health as well.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear okay? I can't tell if this is on. This is my book. It's called Romancing the Dark in the City of Light, and it is a YA thriller, but it's disguised as a YA thriller. It's actually a book about suicide. And I volunteer at San Francisco Suicide Prevention, which is a crisis line, and we're part of the nationwide network of Lifeline. So if you see that number, 1-800-273-TALK, you can call it anywhere in the US or Canada, and you'll get patched into your nearest crisis line. And if you're in the Bay Area, you might talk to me on Thursdays. But I have long been interested in suicide, and worked on suicide lines when I was 20 years old. And that's because when I was 15, or actually I had just turned 16, we moved to a new city, Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the middle of sophomore year. And I was already struggling with depression. I did deal with depression throughout my teens and into my early 20s. But I became suicidal. And it was something that I certainly knew myself, but I told absolutely no one. I did not tell my mother, who was a single mother with 3 other kids besides me. I was the oldest child. She had way too much to worry about. We didn't know anyone. We had just moved there, so there weren't teachers or doctors or whatever to talk about. So I struggled with this, and probably it was just a couple of months that it was acute. But one place I took refuge was the library, because first of all, I could read books that made me not feel alone, like The Bell Jar. And I also was doing research on death. Because I was thinking about it, I thought it might be a good idea to learn a little more about it. So I was reading on death and dying and books about hospice. And actually, this has come in very handy in my writing career later, so I don't regret a minute of it. I do also have a niece who was diagnosed as bipolar. She had substance abuse problems, as often go hand in hand with some mental health problems, just because it's a way to self-medicate. And unfortunately, she completed suicide 2 years ago. So I'm very interested in the mental health community and in advocating for those that are struggling. We don't, with suicide and mental health both, there's still a lot of stigma. They're both completely treatable or preventable. Suicide is preventable. Mental health, you can learn to cope with it and do pretty much anything you want in your life, but only if we talk about it. So not only am I willing to talk about it, but I wrote a book about it. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Stephanie, you want to share your book?
Yes, hi. I'm Stephanie Kuehn, and I'm the author of 4 young adult books, the most recent being The Smaller Evil. All my books tend to deal with mental illness in some way, maybe directly or indirectly. Not necessarily because that's always what I set out to do, but just sort of the lens that I see the world through. This most recent book is about a boy. He's got generalized anxiety disorder and ADHD and some other issues, and he doesn't have really great self-esteem, and he ends up running away to sort of follow the self-actualization guru into to this sort of retreat in this remote compound in the hills of Big Sur, where all sorts of weird, creepy things happen. But he's definitely sort of pursuing and trying to find this answer of sort of, is there something, do I feel sort of so isolated, alone, and unhappy because there's something that's fundamentally wrong with me, or is there something wrong with the environment that I'm in? And he's sort of trying to be in a different environment to see what he can understand about that and what it means to belong and what that can look like. Which I think is often a very, at least for me, a very typical sort of adolescent journey and conflict that we can run into over and over and over again, trying to understand ourselves and our place in the world, and especially when you're dealing with any sort of mental illness, it definitely is easy to internalize what that means about your self-concept and how you see yourself and how you think others see you in ways that can be really become very ingrained and feel shameful or feel like it's hard to get help, and I think that's really sad. And so, I hope by writing books with characters who are dealing with these things, that sort of the resilience and the strength that it takes to be living with something that's really hard, and I hope that comes through, and also the idea that when people do ask for help, I think what Rocio was saying, doing that therapy work can be one of the hardest things, and most people don't do it. And anybody who does, it takes so much strength and so much courage, and it's just something to honor and to really respect. And so I always hope that comes through as well. To let you know a little bit about me, I'm someone I grew up in the Bay Area and went to school and was working here, and then in my mid-30s I decided to go back to school and study psychology. Ended up getting a doctorate in clinical psychology, and now I'm a postdoc and studying for the licensing exam. So I've worked as a therapist in many settings with young kids, teenagers, college students, and adults. And it was also around the time when I went back to school that I started writing as well, and I sort of just needed this creative outlet to process lots of things that I was trying to understand and think about in terms of not just mental illness and mental health, but just sort of fundamental things about humanity, like how do people change, how does context and culture and everything that is happening in our lives, it's one thing to read the DSM and know the symptoms of a certain diagnostic criteria for a certain disorder, but everything is contextual and everything is unique. And so wanting to express and understand a lot of those thoughts and have them make sense, or at least explore and understand some of those things for myself. And that's where a lot of the inspiration for my books come from. I usually don't have answers to any of the questions that I'm asking, but they are ideas that I want to explore. And I love writing about teenagers and adolescents. I think part of it being that, yes, here's this time of identity formation, and when you're dealing with some sort of mental illness or symptoms or psychosocial stressors that's coming up during the teenage years, it's different than as an adult. Like, the perspective is very different. The help you need is with adults often. It can come from peers too, but there's so much self-comparison and self-judgment that just comes with being a teenager that it just makes it that much harder to get help or to ask for help. And anything I can do to sort of model what it looks like, or to write books where somebody might see themselves or understand that experience, because I do feel like books are a safe place for people. Some things are really vulnerable to talk about, and a book is such a non-judgmental space to explore and think about things or experience something with someone else. A book will never judge you, and I think that's something that's really beautiful and special about that. I mean, obviously I value therapy, and I think therapy is a really, really wonderful thing. I also think books can be wonderfully therapeutic as well, both writing and reading them. So that's just a little bit about me and my focus and my interest in mental health and being here and talking with people, as well as the books that I write. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Neal.
I'm Neal Shusterman, the author of Challenger Deep. Challenger Deep started long before I wrote it, when my son Brendan was in second grade, and he was assigned to do an ocean report, which was on the curriculum for all second graders. And kids were choosing things like sharks and dolphins and whales, and Brendan chose the Marianas Trench. He's that kid. And the Marianas Trench is the deepest place in the world, and so we started studying it together, and we got all of these books, and we discovered that the deepest place, the bottom of the trench, had a special name. It was called Challenger Deep. And I thought, what a cool place for the name for the deepest place in the world. What a cool title for a book. So at that point, I had just negotiated a contract for 2 books. First book was going to be Downsiders. Second book was Untitled. But the legal department of the publisher had to have a title for the second book for the contract. So I said to my editor, well, why don't we call it Challenger Deep? And my editor said, oh, okay, what's that about? And I said, the ocean. I had a title, I did not have a story. Ultimately, I ended up writing Full Tilt instead. And then it was time for another contract. Same situation, a 2-book contract. The first book was going to be Everlost. And we still hadn't decided whether it was going to be a series yet. They needed a title for the second book, so I slapped Challenger Deep on as a title. It became the placeholder title in my contract, sort of an inside joke between me and my publishers. Then, when Brendan was 15, he started to develop some issues. Now, Brendan was he was very popular, outgoing, he did well in school, he had a lot of friends, but he started to withdraw from his social group. And he started to develop anxiety. At the beginning of his sophomore year, he started confessing to his mom and me that he was having thoughts that he didn't know what to do with. He said that he felt that the kids in school were out to get him. How did he know this? Because he could read their thoughts. He started believing that the birds that were landing on our lawn were there to give him messages. He started believing that his thoughts were so powerful they were shooting down through the earth and causing earthquakes elsewhere in the world. And over a period of just about 2 to 3 weeks, he just fell off this psychological cliff to a place where he was believing the strangest things. He was hearing voices. He was seeing things. We brought him to the hospital, and he was admitted, and ultimately he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. Now, the thing is with diagnoses is that we think we can put these things all into little boxes, but we can't. Every single patient presents differently. Every single doctor who saw him over the next couple of years gave him a different diagnosis. I mean, first it was psychotic depression, then it was bipolar, then it was schizophrenia, then it was schizoaffective. Schizoaffective is a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. And we were struggling as a family to help him and to deal with this. When he was in the depths of his illness in the hospital, and he really could not tell the difference between what was going on in the outside world and what was going on inside his head, when that line between reality and mind was gone, which is really what schizophrenia is, he said to me, Dad, I'm at the bottom of the ocean screaming at the top of my lungs, and nobody can hear me. And suddenly I knew what Challenger Deep was going to be about. But I couldn't write it. We were in the depths with him. We were struggling with him to help bring him back from this deep, dark place in his own mind. It took about 4 years. He had a couple of relapses, had to be hospitalized again. But eventually, he started to pull himself out of it with medication, with the support of his family, his doctors, and his own will. He got back to a place where he was thriving, and he was dealing with the illness. And so I asked him, when he was in a much better place, if it would be okay if I wrote a book about mental illness. Not about him. I mean, we would take the things that happened to him and we would sort of fold them in to this fictional character. and sort of tell the story that way. And also I asked him if I could use his artwork. When he was in the depths of his illness, he would do these elaborate, abstract line drawings, just obsessively. He would do one and then another. It was like his only way to communicate what was inside his mind. And so we have hundreds of them. And as I started to look through them, certain things started to sort of pop out. One of them, when you look at it, you can see whatever you want in a lot of these drawings. And one of them, to me, it looked like the bow of a ship and an angel sprouting forth at the very front of the bow. And I thought, well, that's kind of like, it looks kind of like the figurehead of a ship coming to life. And so, based on his artwork, I created this story, this fantasy story, about a kid who was on this very surrealistic, dreamlike journey on a pirate ship across the ocean to explore Challenger Deep, the deepest place in the world. Running parallel to that story is a story of the same kid in his everyday life, bit by bit, falling off the edge of his own sanity and losing connection with the world until he has to be hospitalized. Once he's at the hospital, we realize that everything that we've seen that's happening on the ship, he is about to experience at the hospital. The ship is just the delusion of what happened at the hospital. And at that point, the two worlds merge and start to flow back and forth between one another until he finally starts to be able to discern what's real and what's not. So when I finished Challenger Deep, it took 4 years. I was working on and off. I told my editor I was not going to write this to a deadline. I was going to write it whenever I felt like writing. Whenever I had an inspiration, I would write it. It took 4 years. And when I submitted it, it's a weird story. I didn't know whether or not it was any good. My thought was either this is the best thing that I've ever written or it's absolute garbage. I was terrified that my editor would say, Neal, I don't know about this. This is too bizarre. But my editor really liked it, and the publisher was very supportive of it. And I'm thrilled to say that it won the National Book Award, which of all of my books, for that one to have gotten this award meant the world to me. And when I went up to accept, when you get the award, they don't tell you ahead of time. It's kind of like the Oscars. You go there to this big fancy ballroom and you wait, and there's the 5 others, in the young adult category. 4 others. We were all there, and they announced it. And as I went up, I realized I don't have a speech because I just felt it was a little presumptuous to write a speech for an award that you didn't know that you had won. And so I sort of just spoke from the heart. And in the middle of the speech, I was talking about Brendan and how much this is as much as mine. And just in the spur of the moment, he was out there in the audience. I said, Brendan, come on up here. This is as much yours as it is mine. And we accepted the award together. And it's amazing that something that was the darkest time of our lives ended up at this culminating as one of the greatest moments in both of our lives. I believe that things happen to us for a reason. But I also believe that we have an important hand in making that reason. And I'm thrilled to have been able to take something that was such a difficult time in our lives as a family and my son's life and turning it around and using it to be able to shed light on such a difficult subject. The goal with Challenger Deep was not to tell a story about mental illness, but to bring you through it. When you read it, I want you to feel as if you've had a psychotic episode. I want you to get through that book and feel as if your mind has been in that place so that you know what it's like to have been lost in your own mind. And so hopefully you'll have more compassion and empathy for people who are suffering. And if you're suffering yourself, to know that you are not alone. And there's lots of people who go through this. And I'm hoping that it opens up a dialogue about mental illness and helps remove the stigma of it. There is no shame in it, and we need to talk about it openly.
Thank you. I'm wondering for the authors writing about these novels with such personal connections and personal experiences to mental illness, I'm wondering if you can tell us some of those challenges about getting so personal and what you did when it became maybe too challenging.
Sorry.
Several of you had personal experiences with your novels.
When I was writing it, I was terrified, primarily because I wanted to make sure that it was a positive experience for Brendan. And Brendan, when I finished the first draft, I didn't show it to Brendan right away because I had to prepare myself. And I had to make a commitment to myself. And I said, if Brendan reads this and feels that he just doesn't want this out there, I will burn it. I will shelve it and no one will ever see it. And I didn't want to show it to him until I felt in my heart that I'd be willing to do that if he didn't feel it was going to be good for him. And he read it, and his response was, well, you know, this medication didn't quite do this, it did this instead. If you change this, and if this part, I didn't really feel like this then, but this is what it was like. And he gave me comments and suggestions, and we worked together in the revision, and he was very, very supportive of it through the whole process. But it's, you know, putting yourself out there with things that are personal. What I thought it was going to be much harder to write, what I found was that it was extremely cathartic. And that taking this, rather than taking what had happened and pushing it under the rug and just forgetting about it, opening it up and shedding light on it and thinking about it and trying to create meaning out of it was a very positive experience for both of us.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I know, Anne, you had mentioned reading books can be very therapeutic, I think, Stephanie and Anne, and helpful, but also writing as a tool and as something to help when you're feeling down and anxious. Yeah.
I would second that in this case, there was the germ of the idea came when I actually was in the metro. We were lucky enough to live in France for a while, and someone ended up on the tracks. And it was very crowded, and I had my daughter with me, so we left. And I never did know if the person had fallen, or if they had been pushed, or if they had jumped. And I looked afterwards. I mean, I was consumed with this event. It was very traumatic, really, and could find no mention of it anywhere, even. So I assumed then that it was a suicide, because suicides generally are not publicized unless they're a celebrity or something. And they're not news. They happen all the time. And so, but that event wouldn't let me go, and I started thinking about it. I didn't actually start the book for 3 years, but it was by virtue of writing this book, and it was basically coming to terms with my own feelings about having been suicidal, you know, in the very distant past, and having seen someone who acted on an impulse I had felt very long ago, and just working through it all and bringing that whole situation to life in a fictional character, a completely fictional character in a fictional world. It was incredibly useful for me. It was therapeutic, and I recommend it.
Rocio, can you tell us about some of the challenges maybe of when you became a speaker or when you got to the point where you were ready to share your story, what maybe some of those challenges were for you?
Sure. So when I first started speaking, I was also really scared. I thought people were going to react in kind of a negative way and say, you know, you're too young to be feeling this, or it's basically, I was afraid of not being validated. And I think that's the scariest part when you open up to somebody, whoever it may be, and you feel that instead of listening, you are not being validated. And so, you know, definitely challenges were, at first, you know, I was still going through feelings of shame, feeling very ashamed of my condition, not being able to talk about it very publicly. So actually, I started speaking about it publicly to strangers, and then that kind of led to me speaking more openly about it to people that I was closer to. It's kind of ironic. But yeah, I mean, I guess some of the challenges were, they were all, I guess, presumptions that I had. But what was so beautiful was when I started speaking, I got really good feedback. It was very positive. People would come up to me and say, Rocio, I've been through similar things. And oh my gosh, you know, because of what you said, I'm now able to understand my family member who is going through something very similar. So you kind of helped me to understand her a little bit better. And I was like, wow, like, you know, it wasn't just speaking to people and speaking to providers and for them to get an insight, but it was also really, really, really healing. And that's why I think I continue to do it so often. You know, I'm always speaking with Helene or with other organizations, and I'm always so open about it. You know, because like you were saying, it's adding meaning to it and turning something that was very difficult into something that has meaning. And for me, it's definitely been more of a blessing than anything else. So. Sometimes I am not having a good day, and I've been through something kind of difficult. Maybe sometimes I have anxiety, and I already said yes to a presentation. And you know what? I go ahead and I do it, because if I'm feeling anxious, people are going to see what that's like. You know, and I say, I'm very honest. I say, you know, today I had a hard day. I'm feeling a little bit anxious right now, but this is how I worked through it, or this is what I'm doing to work through it right now. And I feel just, you know, being honest with myself and with others, and really committing myself to you know, being as transparent and as you know, as I possibly can, and kind of just really honoring, you know, wherever I am. Whatever place I am and how I'm feeling. So.
Thank you. One of the themes that keeps coming up here is that it really can, mental illness and mental challenges really can happen to anyone. And Rocio mentioned you had a good family, you had a lot of stuff going on for you, but it still just came on. And I think all of you kind of referenced that a little bit, and Stephanie, with your background in psychology. I'm wondering if any of you have any comments about that, or just any personal experience with the stigma or the judgment, or of feeling that how could this happen to me or to my family when.
Yeah, I can talk about. You know, I think it's really hard, both in internal ways and external ways. I think there can be the self-judgment of like, I have nothing to feel bad about. Therefore, I'm a really terrible person for feeling this way. Why, you know, I should feel grateful. I have this and this and this, and so why am I having problems? So I think there can be that self-judgment. And then I think, unfortunately, at least in my experience, again, you know, clinically, and the work that I've done, you know, I've seen some. So I've worked, you know, I've done work with counties in mental health for children and adolescents, and worked in a lot of different school districts. It's interesting. I think some of the stigma I've seen around certain issues in very affluent areas can be very different. So I was part of like an outreach group that was working with different schools, talking about like domestic abuse and, you know, certain types of child abuse, sexual abuse, things that could be happening in the home, and getting feedback from you know, administrators at very affluent schools saying, you know, we don't have those kinds of problems at our school. You know, that's those are for those types of people in those types of school, which is really sad and disappointing, right? Because like they just don't want to see that these things could be happening. It has nothing to do with how much money or how affluent or what kind of status a family might have. You know, these types of things happen in all different families and all different situations, and sort of to have authority figures or people who have access to resources that could help to kind of use whatever that is to shut that down or shut off access for children, I find really sad and upsetting. And so I do think, I think there are internal barriers and there are external ones as well. And so, you know, anything for any of us who have power to try and break down that stigma, and to accept that, yes, of course these things happen everywhere, and any child, no matter what their family background is, deserves empathy and help and resources.
One of the things that I tried to break down in Challenger Deep was the common misconception, which seems to be most of the times when you see mental illness portrayed in the media, the family members or parents are either in denial or judgmental or clueless. And that always frustrates me, because I've attended a lot of NAMI meetings with other parents and other families who have kids that are suffering from mental illness. Most parents are not clueless; they're helpless. Mm-hmm. It's you feel helpless to be able to help your child. You can't fix it. And it takes time and medication and support and therapy, and it's not something that a parent can just fix. But it's frustrating when you see the media portray that. And I think the reason why the media tends to portray that in movies and in other places is because it's easy for the public to sit back and say, oh, well, that wouldn't happen to me because I wouldn't be in denial. You know, that's them. That's those people. And then you could sit comfortably back and say to yourself, well, this wouldn't happen to me until it does. So I would like to sort of try to dispel that myth.
I would just add that at the crisis line, we're talking to people by and large who are in crisis. And it can happen to almost anyone. If you put enough pressure on someone, they can go into crisis. And then the only way to relieve that mental anguish is they start thinking of ending their lives. Some people can take more pressure than others. Some of us who deal with depression or anxiety maybe don't. Less pressure is going to push us over the edge more quickly or whatever, but I think of it as a balance, that people have protective factors and we have genetics, but then there are transitions and there are losses and there are any number of problems that can tip you over sometimes. And we talk to people who are all ages, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all races, all everything. And what they have in common is that they are in crisis and can't stand it.
Thank you. I know we have about 10 minutes left for this panel, and I want to make sure we get to any audience questions today. We have a microphone up here since we are recording, so if you wouldn't mind, if you have a question, you can come step up to the mic and ask your question for the panel. So think about your questions and get ready to stand up. Yes, come on up. Thank you.
Hi there. First of all, I want to applaud all of you for taking on such heavy and such challenging topics and speaking very openly and also writing very openly about them. I have a question for the writers. I guess my question is, not to simplify, but which techniques do you use to make your books quote-unquote user-friendly, meaning these are very serious and very heavy issues. And I'm curious, I know, Neal, you mentioned that you have a parallel story running in your book where the boy goes on an adventure, and I'd love to hear some more about that. I also just want to know how you make this realistic and true to life, but at the same time make the reading experience bearable for your readers. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take that on. There is actually a lot of humor in Challenger Deep. The character of Caden is very funny. And there's times that you laugh, and there's times that the things that he's talking about will make you cry, and it's all mixed together. But so is my son. I remember this one time when we were all together in the car, and he was, in a place where he was out of the hospital. But when you go to the hospital, they just stabilize you. You're not all better now when you go home. You go home, and months and months of recovery and dealing with it and changing medications. And there was one time we were all in the car. It was me and all 4 kids, and Brendan just sighed. He just got this heavy sigh, and he said, "Somewhere in the world, someone's head just exploded." And we all burst out laughing. And he did too. And sometimes in the darkness there's those moments where you just have to laugh at it and be human.
I would agree that I think humor is critical in dealing with any heavy subject, any dark story, but certainly mental illness and certainly suicide. I mean, you can't get much darker. If anything, this probably does not have enough humor in it. In my second book, I hope to have instilled more humor, but it's so important in making a story at least palatable for a larger audience. I like dark, intense stories. I don't need necessarily that much humor, but I think most people appreciate some levity to these darker subjects.
It's interesting. A question in terms of thinking about techniques. I mean, I guess when I am writing a story, like I rarely think that it's about a mental illness or a diagnosis. Like that's part of maybe what a character is dealing with, and that's the way that they experience the world. But the story could be about something else. So it's not just kind of, some intense, this really negative experience that somebody is living with like it's not just 24/7 that there's other things going on. It is just an aspect of their life, and it may be a painful one, or one that may come to, cause consequences or pain, or that they need help for. But again, I mean, it's always going to be just part of somebody's life. And so I think it would be sort of disingenuous to make it just, all of somebody's identity. Of course, it's not. And so I guess that maybe that's the way I think about it. I don't think about it as a book about a mental illness. It's about a character, and there's something happening, and there's some other external conflict, and this is also part of it. So weaving those together.
If it's all right, I'd just like to read one page just to sort of illustrate what I'm talking about with the sense of humor of the character. Because the chapters are all like one page long. It's just all of these bunch of chapters. This one's called Up or Drown. No matter how rational the world seems to be, you never really know what crazy crap is around the bend. I saw this in the news once. By the way, this is true. Some socialite in a Manhattan high-rise takes an elevator from the penthouse to the basement garage, dropping down 67 floors, 68 if you count the mezzanine, to get her Mercedes and go to a gallery on Madison Avenue or whatever it is that Manhattan socialites do with their time. What she doesn't know is that a water main burst just a few minutes ago next to her building. So the elevator reaches the basement, and as the doors begin to open, the elevator is flooded by freezing water. What's she going to do? There isn't even a worst-case scenario for this because it's beyond anyone's imagination. In 5 seconds, the water's at her waist, then at her neck, and then she drowns, never knowing what the hell happened or how such a horrific thing is even possible. I mean, think about it. Drowning in an elevator in a skyscraper. That's wrong on 67 different levels, not counting the mezzanine. The weird thing is, hearing stories like this makes me feel a kind of kinship with the Almighty, because it proves that even God has psychotic episodes.
Is there another question?
Okay, so I was wondering for the authors if you believe having these kind of stories with that feature mental illness in like English classes at school, if that would help maybe spread more awareness and educate students through class at school. Do you think that would work well?
Thank you. I'd want to hear from Rocio about that as well.
I'll just say, yes, definitely, and make sure they buy lots of class sets.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, and I also, yes, I mean, I think there should be books that kids are reading that do address these types of issues, just really honestly and with empathy and without judgment. And that there should also be space in school to talk about these things and to talk about them openly and without judgment with each other. The wonderful thing about books, I mean, I think, one book about depression might speak to one person on a really authentic level, and somebody else could think, well, that doesn't feel like my experience at all. And that's fine. Like, there should just be all kinds of books and then discussions and thoughts about them. And again, there's no right or wrong about how somebody, receives or interprets a book. And just having that opportunity and having people who can guide those discussions in really productive and interesting and honest ways makes a huge difference. I mean, I think just community and feeling like a community is a safe place to be able to talk about these things, just that level of safety helps so much. So I think it'd be great.
And the more stories that are out there from everybody, not just the mental health community, but the more comfortable you become with them, the more stigma drops. It's we need lots more stories from everyone. So,
Rosie, do you think that would have been helpful in high school when you were experiencing the beginnings of your struggles to have a book or something that was part of your school experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in school we learn about nutrition and family life, and how fitness is really important. We have to stay healthy, but there's never really a venue to talk about, hey, these things happen. Talk about mental wellness and what it is to be mentally well. And yeah, I mean, it kind of blows my mind because, you know, middle school, high school, these are already really tough times, and your brain is changing, and you're going through all these hormones. And so I feel like having that added support would be just monumental, and it would really help a lot of people in just helping them realize that, you know, these things happen and it's okay, and, you know, there are resources, and it's okay to ask for help. I feel like it would really help students in general.
Thank you. And I know we're just about out of time, so I want to just say, from my role as the Health and Wellness Coordinator in the San Mateo High School District, I'm working at Cappuccino and Hill and Mills, and we have coordinators and mental health therapists at every school site now. Our district has moved in a direction of bringing a lot more mental health services into the high school. I know at the middle schools and the elementary schools in the area as well, they contract with different outside agencies. There's a lot of community service agencies in our area for mental health services. So we're looking at doing just that. We're doing more presentations for parents, for students, for teachers. We're doing more awareness. We have National Mental Health Awareness Week every year that we do a lot of resource outreach and trying to reduce that stigma and trying to, like everyone here has said, encourage people to seek help, either for yourself, for your friend, the school counselors, the therapists on site. If you're not sure who to call, there's the crisis lines. There's a lot of resources and help out there, and the more we're able to ask for help or encourage our friends and our peers to ask for help, the more we're going to help reduce the stigma and also hopefully get help for each other and save some lives too. I just want to say thank you to all of our speakers, our authors, and Rocio for their honesty and their personal experience and sharing so much with all of you. All the authors will be on another panel this afternoon, so if you didn't get to answer your question yet, you'll be able to catch them again.
I'd like to say just one thing, just to end on a positive note. Brendan is 27 now. He is graduating this year from Cal State Long Beach with a degree in film. And to meet him, you would never know he's been through this. He is living a very full and complete life in spite of his illness. So, you know, there's plenty of hope out there.
And Rocio and Anne are two more examples of just survivors of people who have gone through these struggles. So thank you. Thank you all.